Good evening. I apologize for the late start here again. I'm still struggling with what YouTube wants me to do because the old method of live streaming, I start it and somehow it collapses immediately. So apparently YouTube does not want me to use that. And so then I have to go back and try to restart using the new system, which I'm currently doing. I apologize for the delay in getting started with substance here, but I see a few of you are coming back. Good evening, Mertz. Welcome. So what I'm going to do is I want to first give you a link to the Jordan Peterson lecture that I'm going to be commenting on this evening, and that is here. And so after we have our conversation this evening, you can go back and look at Jordan's lecture or not. I don't really care, but I have to figure out what the heck I'm doing here. Let's see. Got to get a couple things off my screen here. All right. And so we're in the 130th weekly Monday meeting of the Carl Jung Depth Psychology Reading Group. I've been doing this for over 3 years now. This is the third session of year number 3, or 4. This is the third session of year number 4. And throughout this session, I will be very happy to discuss any topic you may wish to discuss. And so please feel free to chime in at any point. I see I kind of missed the link there. That's not, maybe that's the proper link, but let me give you the clean link to the Jordan Peterson lecture because it got mushed together there. And so that is the link. And so what I'm going to do is talk about some of these things, and I'll welcome your inputs regarding them. Dr. Peterson started his lecture by saying that virtue, ethics, and morality is a mode of being on which all fields of study rest, and they are not in themselves a field of study. Well, I think that many theologians would disagree with him on this point, but in any case, obviously that we need virtue and ethics and morality in our societies, and the question is, how do we get it? How do we get there? And we've been talking about that for a couple weeks now, and so there's a few interesting comments he makes. He says, the lack of virtue makes people ill. They are tortured and tormented. So if you know anybody that is lacking in virtue, you can test this in your own world. We Americans have a prime example of a man that doesn't think he needs to pay his bills to the people that build his buildings, and it certainly appears to me that he's tortured, and he's certainly not very happy. And so what Dr. Peterson says is that in the clinical setting, when you're going to talk to a psychotherapist, which the individual I'm referring to probably isn't doing, then you provide a forum to tell the truth, so people can, so then the therapist can work with the truth rather than the falsehood. And obviously there are some people who are psychotic who don't know the difference between truth and falsehood, and don't care anyway. But one of the truths that I want to emphasize is that our materialism never provides enough. There's never a solution to our lives because we get some material thing. Because whenever you get that thing, then it proves that it isn't quite what you thought it was going to be for you. And this is my favorite example of this. And there's an old saying in the boating community that the best 2 days of having a boat are the day you get it and the day you get rid of it. And in between those 2 days, it's a hole in the water in which you pour money. And, I think that you can have some happiness on a boat. You can pour life into it, and then enjoy it. But it's, in the end, if you get that by cheating other people and so on, then you have problems. Then you start to get sick, in my view. And I think that Peterson is right about that. And he does say that, the issue is materialism, that we're masters of material transformation, which we obviously are. If you look at everything in the image behind me, everything that you can see is the result of our materialism and our ability to make things and put together careers that allows us to purchase things. But in the end, none of them are alive. and so do they bring us happiness? And so, good evening, Colin. He says, hi, I worked with Dr. Peterson for around 3 years, so this is a very interesting stream. I hope you are well. Well, thank you, and I'll look forward to your comments on what I'm saying. So I think it's very interesting, one fundamental thing we can say about Jordan Peterson from his 12 Rules of Life is that he believes entirely on logos, and that's rationality. But then in his lecture, he says the fundamental elements of our own being are not material. And I say, yeah, that's right. They're Eros. They're on the chaos side of his equation in that book. And so what we have to realize is that we have to live our own lives. Kiza, welcome. Curious as to what you think of Peterson as a whole. Okay, well, I think Peterson is probably an outstanding clinical psychologist. I wouldn't know because I've never experienced him in that environment. And I've never taken a psychology course. I'm entirely self-taught. So from what I see, he obviously is a good university level professor of psychology. I think he's limited in the sense that he feels he has to go back and rebuild knowledge from the beginning of maybe the Enlightenment, at least, if not going back to the time of Christ. And in this lecture, he does go back to the time of Christ because he makes reference to the book of Thomas, which was a Gnostic gospel, apparently, discovered in the 50s, I think. But in any case, I think he's a good professor of psychology. I think that universities do us a disservice when they make every student try to work out what the meaning of all these philosophers was throughout history, okay, because we've developed to a point now, and so all of us don't have to go back and be Nietzsche and work out everything based on what happened in the past. We can just read Nietzsche or Jung or Freud and understand where they were at the beginning of the 20th century and basically understand why. I don't feel that I have to know the ins and outs of what Schopenhauer thought or what Hegel thought or what Kant thought. It's, I could care less about that. I want to know how I can use these things in my life today. And so I'm not, except for people who have a objective in their life of becoming a clinical psychologist, I don't think I necessarily need those things, and therefore I'm not going back to them because I get them sufficiently from Dr. Jung's oeuvre. I don't have to go back and read all Schopenhauer's works and then try to noodle out what Jung was thinking about Schopenhauer's works. Who cares? I mean, that was then and this is now. That's at least my attitude about it. And so my only major criticism about Dr. Peterson is that he seems to be stuck in the logos. And as I discussed last week, when I was talking about his inability to say, I believe in God, he can't say it because he's stuck in the logos and he's stuck in the itty-bitty, nitty-gritty issues of the logos, and he doesn't understand that that religion is not there. Okay, it's not in the logos, and that's the fundamental problem. Now, in the last couple of weeks, I've been reading this book into this YouTube channel, The Creation of Consciousness, Jung's Myth for Modern Man by Edward F. Edinger. And I urge you to listen to it, read it, because it's very important. But one of the things that's critical appears right on the back cover. So let me just read that to you. It says, the author proposes nothing less than a new world view, a creative collaboration between the scientific pursuit of knowledge, which is rationalism, logos, right, and the religious search for meaning. Then there's this quote, religion is based on Eros, science on logos. Religion sought linkage with God, science sought knowledge. The age now dawning seeks linked knowledge. Okay, so the point is that knowledge and the logos, rationality, has gained the upper hand over the last 500 years, and that has been called the Enlightenment. But from a religious point of view, it's really the Endarkenment, because science came along and punched holes in all the religious myths, but it hasn't changed the reality of life and the need for the religious and the need for meaning. And that can't be given to us by rationality. In other words, we can't have a government that's going to issue you your meaning today and, or this is the meaning of your life, so you have to go out and do this, this, and this. That would be like being tied down to a Procrustean bed, I think, to be told by our government how we're going to live our lives. And so we each have to decide for ourselves, and in the process of that, we have to decide what the meaning of our life is. And so Dr. Peterson touches on this, but he doesn't quite get there because he keeps wanting to bring it into the logos, into rationality. And he's not prepared to accept that, oh, by the way, all the things that you see behind me, they all came from the irrational side of life first. They all came from an image or a vision that some producer of the item, whether it's a picture on the wall or a book or my wife's computer, what have you, every thing that we create, even you, because you were once a twinkle in your father's eye. Okay, and so all those things came from imagination, from the what he calls the chaos side of life, but it's the irrational side of life. Why were my 3 daughters conceived on the day they were conceived? It wasn't because of some rational decision. It was just, that's the way it was. And that was pretty irrational, actually. So anyway, let me go back to your comments. So Di says, I bought his 2 books, but as I told you before, there was a moment when his views became insufficient for me, and now I see why. He helped me see the light, but not enough to get out of the hole. That's a good way of putting it. Because he immersed himself in what went wrong in the 20th century, and he's largely right about that. I mean, what he says about both Nazism, fascism, and communism as implemented in the Soviet Union and in China, they were murderous, and they were on both ends of the spectrum. I mean, I've had somebody recently come to me and say, well, Nazism was socialism. Well, it's called National Socialism, but just because it's called National Socialism doesn't make it that. It was pure and simple fascism, which was the productive class taking over and requiring people to basically be their slaves and fight their wars for them. And so we have to learn to live. We really do. So Grace says, happy full moon, everyone. Yes, I should go out and howl, I suppose. Anthony says, did you listen to Peterson and Prager video released the same time as his answer to the question of God? It dives a little more into his thinking on the issue. Yes, I did listen to it, and I didn't find anything to object to in the Prager video. And so, I think that somehow with all the people that are following Jordan Peterson, I think 1 or 2 of them may have started to mention my comments to him. And I do think he's altering course. Okay, it's like turning a super tanker, however, because he has had himself so immersed in the logos for so very long that it's very hard for him, and you see him struggling with it in his various lectures. And so Peterson often talks about the need for chaos and making things out of it. Yes, he does. And he did in this lecture as well, the one that I'm going to talk about here, or I am talking about. His biblical series dives into many of the things talked about before. But his biblical series is basically trying to